All our speakers are very, very well qualified to speak on all these subjects. Mary McFadyen is a teaching research assistant in Scottish Culture and Heritage at Edinburgh University. And she's also a member of the National Collective. That, of course, I'm sure you've come across it, especially during the Edinburgh Fringe, is the creative movement within the independence campaign. She's here to talk about Scottish identity and what part, if any, this plays in the debate. Please welcome Mary McFadyen.
Thanks, Louise. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you here tonight. And just before I start, I'd like to thank Sarah for inviting me and for putting this event together, because it's really quite remarkable to see so many of you here. Can you hear me at the back? Okay. Yes. Okay. So, as Louise said, I've been asked by Sarah to talk about Scottish identity and what part, if any, this plays in the debate from my own perspective. And of course, discussions about what independence means for the rest of the UK are often wrapped up in debates about national identity and essentially what nationalism is, whether ethnic or civic or somewhere in between. And identity, of course, is a vastly complicated and fascinating topic. I teach a course at the university on identity politics, and we have endless fun debating who has the power to accept or reject these identity claims? What are the markers of national identity? Is it birthplace, residency, ancestry, values, a combination of these, any of these? And in the context of the independence debate, I often hear from friends that they feel that they are perhaps excluded from what they see as an SNP-dominated nationalist campaign. They feel that they ought not to vote because they aren't Scottish, or in some cases not Scottish enough, which is an interesting concept. And yes, I consider myself to be Scottish. And so I can see that engagement in this political process is perhaps easier for me than it might be for others. When I speak, no one rejects or challenges my identity or my right to participate. But at the same time, I find it difficult to understand why people feel so excluded, because for me, the debate is really not about this kind of identity at all. It's about where we come from. It's about where we're going as a society. It's about the kind of politics we want. And for me, it's far more simple. It's about governance and democracy. So what does my national identity mean to me then? I suppose I see Scotland as a diverse ecological collection of many places and many voices. I would argue that in Scotland and elsewhere, there is a strong sense of locality that is in many cases, and for many people, much more important in their everyday lives than their nationality. I grew up in the Borders. I'm now living in Edinburgh, and we're here in Leith, which has a real sense of place. I have friends from the Western Highlands, the Hebrides, Shetland, the North East. Each one of these places is a distinct environment inspiring colourful expressions of language and culture. Nations, of course, are fictions. They're stories created from the human imagination. Communities and places are real. For me, my sense of national identity is built on a perception of community and a series of relationships with people and with place. It's built on an awareness of history and culture of this part of the planet where I happen to have been born, and more than that, a sense of responsibility to this place and its environment. If nations are narratives then, my national identity is a story I choose to believe in. So what about nations and nationalisms? So many people are suspicious of the very word nationalism, and by extension, anyone who calls themselves a nationalist. Many believe that nationalism is simply a synonym for fascism. And all too often in the mainstream press, the diverse groups that make up the Yes movement are grouped together in derogatory terms as the nationalists and so dismissed. I'm sure I'm talking to an intelligent room, but it's important to articulate this all the same. Not all nationalisms are the same. And Sarah has asked me to make the slightly crude, although useful distinction between ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism. In the most basic sense, ethnic nationalism is about the purity of your lineage, a politics of exclusion. And civic nationalism, at the other end of the spectrum, is a welcome narrative celebrating diversity, a politics of inclusion and participation. The kind of nationalism espoused by the SNP is the latter, a welcoming narrative, a celebration of diversity. And in this vision, there is no reason why a Eastern European family or a family of refugees cannot come to live here and become Polish Scots, African Scots, and by the same logic, there's no reason why we can't have Welsh Scots, or English Scots, or Irish Scots. You can catch my drift on and on. Of course, the real picture of what is going on in Scotland is far more complicated, and it would be foolish of me to stand here and deny that ethnic nationalism does not exist. It does, but these fringe voices are firmly in the minority. As a Green in this debate, what makes me uneasy is not the kind of nationalism espoused by the SNP government, but the bizarre notion of patriotism espoused by the Better Together campaign. Often we'll hear, often we hear, I'm voting no, but that doesn't mean I'm not patriotic. I don't understand this. Personally speaking, I'm not proud to be Scottish. How can we be proud of an accident of birth? The fact that I happen to be born on one or the other side of an imaginary line across the landscape is an accident, and this escapes me, and in my view is the real danger here. And this is not to mention the Union Jack waving and British nationalism and irony lost on many. So I'd like to make the point, and it's a simple point, but you do not need to be a nationalist to vote yes in this referendum. The Greens are not, and will never be, a nationalist party. The Green Party is a party that transcends national borders, moving towards a post-national politics that puts people and planet before profit. We believe that a well-designed democracy is the key to a fair and sustainable society. We believe in putting power in the hands of people, bringing political and economic structures and decision-making closer to communities. For those of us who support independence, full autonomy for the Scottish Parliament is but a stage in a process of our new vision for Scotland. We also want this newly empowered Parliament to devolve power to local communities, to local people in local places. Another reason often put forward for not supporting yes is that independence is portrayed to be about separatism or isolationism. In my experience, a great many people who are uncomfortable with independence come from a broadly Marxist viewpoint, the notion that Scotland's independence will be an abandonment of working people and the rest of the UK. So, from a Green perspective, what about turning our backs on the rest of the UK? Is this not selfish, an act of abandonment? My argument is that bringing power closer to communities here in Scotland will necessarily inspire reform throughout the British Isles. The best thing we can do for the working people of England is to show that another way is possible. This is about a renewed relationship on equal terms. As human beings, we in Scotland will still stand up for the social injustices bestowed upon you by your government. The different colour of our passports will not make us foreigners. There is a better way to be neighbours. I hope and I think many people are now accepting that the independent movement is not so much about nationalism, but about self-determination. The vote for independence is not about where you come from. It's about the direction we want to take as a society. It's about democracy, about holding power to account, about the very real chance to change the system. It's about the story we choose to believe in.